BB for Hody and straight black pride, brothers and sisters. This is your brother, DC Radical 1, with another episode of Ask DC. And it's been a long time since we had one of these, and this question comes from Miss Ebony on Instagram. Miss Ebony's question is, hey DC, earlier this month, well actually, I should correct this. Earlier last month, Congress just passed a bill that prohibits the President of the United States from withdrawing from NATO. What does this mean, and why would they do that? Now, this is an excellent question, and this shows that this sister is paying attention. So first of all, let me apologize for taking so long to address this question. The sister asked the question a long time ago. I had put out a lot of content since then, and so first of all, you have my apologies for the delay. Second of all, I wanted to be sure that I answered this question correctly, so I had to research some things and make sure it was what I thought it was. So this is a simple but complex answer to this question. So the first thing we have to address is, what is NATO? And so a very simple answer for what is NATO. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is an organization of European and North American countries bound together for their collective defense and security. This organization allows for the combining and coordination of the member states' military and logistical resources. The creation of NATO was largely a response to the threat of the Soviet Union to the rest of Europe after the conclusion of World War II. The NATO Treaty was ratified in 1949. Some of the original member states are, and this not all, but some, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Portugal, and Norway. U.S. President Harry S. Truman signed the Mutual Defense Assistance Act in 1949, which gave $1.4 billion towards building Western Europe's defenses. Now, that is the background of what NATO, how NATO was formed, and what it was formed for. So seeing that still leaves the question, okay, that's what it was for in 1949. The Soviet Union no longer exists. So what's still going on? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch a video on the history of NATO. And after we watch the video on the history of NATO, we're going to come back and look at the present day situation.
The guns of World War II had barely cooled when a new conflict threatened to rock Europe. This time around, it was the Western democracies, like Great Britain and France, and their ally across the pond, the United States, versus the Soviet Union and its communist satellites. These two sides each formed their own security agreements to show they meant business. These were NATO and the Warsaw Pact. After the war, the Soviet Union began to flex its muscles, installing communist governments in Eastern Europe. In 1948, the USSR toppled a democratic government in Czechoslovakia and then cut off supply routes to West Berlin. The United States and its Western European allies began to get nervous. Do you see what's going on over there with the Soviets? We don't like that, okay? In April 1949, foreign ministers of a dozen Western European and Northern American nations met in Washington, D.C. to sign the North Atlantic Treaty. This created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. In Article 5 of the treaty, NATO nations agreed that an attack against any of them by, say, the Soviet Union, for example, would be an attack against all of them. Original NATO nations sound off: Belgium, Denmark, Great Britain, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Canada, and the United States. Greece and Turkey joined in 1952, and West Germany in 1955. It was West Germany that made things a little tense. The US and its allies wanted to let West Germany form its own army, But the USSR wasn't psyched about this. The Soviets warned that if West Germany did raise an army and join NATO, they'd make their own alliance. West Germany did join NATO, so the Soviet Union said, okay, we told you so. In May of 1955, it gathered its communist allies in Eastern Europe and sat them down for a good old treaty signing. That treaty was the Warsaw Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, or the Warsaw Pact. They called it the Warsaw Pact because it was signed in, wait for it, Warsaw. Warsaw Pact nations roll call. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, Albania, East Germany, Bulgaria, and the Soviet Union. In 1968, Albania left the pact as the country became more closely aligned with Communist China. Like NATO, Warsaw Pact member nations were bound to come to each other's defense if attacked by an outside power. It also established a central military command, putting the Soviet Union firmly in charge. The Soviet Union also used the pact to keep its members in line. Popular uprisings in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland were all squashed by the Soviets. NATO and the Warsaw Pact. These were the players in the Cold War, facing down each other like two wary nuclear-armed gunfighters, each waiting for the other to flinch and knowing that war between them might mean the end of the world. And they would stay that way till 1991. When the Soviet Union disbanded, so too did the Warsaw Pact.
Now, we have that historical background about NATO and its opposite, the Warsaw Pact. Let's get into the discussion of the question, which let's go back to our original question, which is, why did Congress pass a bill to prohibit the President of the United States from withdrawing from NATO? And first of all, let's look at the first article, which discusses this. And this is from The Hill. It says, Congress approves bill barring any president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO. It says Congress has approved legislation that will prevent any president from withdrawing the United States from NATO without approval from the Senate or with an act of Congress. The measure, spearheaded by Senators Tim Kaine and Marco Rubio, was included in the annual National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, which was passed out of the House on Thursday and is expected, and it since then has been signed by President Biden. The provision underscores Congress's commitment to the NATO alliance that was a target of former President Trump's ire during his term in office. The alliance has taken on revitalized importance under Biden, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Says NATO has held strong in response to Russian President Putin's war in Ukraine and rising challenges around the world, Kaine said in a statement. He added the legislation reaffirms U.S. support for this crucial alliance that is foundational for our national security. It also sends a strong message to authoritarians, around the world that the free world remains united. You can put that free world in quotes. Rubio said the measure serves as a critical tool for congressional oversight. Says we must ensure we are protecting our national interests and protecting the security of our quote-unquote democratic allies. Biden has invested deeply in the NATO alliance during his term, committing more troops and military resources to Europe as a show of force against Putin's war. He has also overseen the expansion of the alliance with the inclusion of Finland and ongoing efforts to secure Sweden's full accession. Okay, stop right there. Now we have basically the answer to the question. When Mr. Trump was president of the United States, he began to examine the relationship between the United States and NATO. And one of the things that he talked about was the large amount of money that is spent by the United States in comparison with the other countries that are involved in NATO. Now, the key part of what this says here is Mr. Biden has the opposite opinion, along with many members of Congress. The passing of this law is literally to prevent Mr. Trump, should he win election again, from withdrawing from NATO, right? The second thing is, Mr. Trump is personal friends with Mr. Putin. There are members of Congress who fear that Trump's friendship with Putin would make him basically be hands off with certain things that Putin wants to do. So literally, the passing of this bill is strictly to thwart anything that they think Trump might do. To prove my point, we will go to our next article. This is from The Hill, and it states, very obviously, lawmakers stuffed a provision into the Pentagon funding bill that makes it all but impossible for Trump to leave NATO. Notice it doesn't say for the president. And this is from, this is from Business Insider, excuse me. It says, if we get down to it, a brief provision in the massive $886 billion bill funding the Pentagon will likely kill former President Donald Trump or any potential future president's ambition to withdraw the United States from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Senator Tim Kaine, a Virginia Democrat, and Marco Rubio, a Florida Republican, teamed up to muscle their bill, which would require an act of Congress or Senate approval to leave NATO, into what has often been deemed a must-pass bill that funds service members and outlines national security priorities. President Joe Biden is expected to sign the legislation into law, which he has subsequently done. The Senate passed the overall legislation 87-13. The House passed it 310-118. The Senate's vote today to pass my bipartisan bill to prevent any U.S. president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO reaffirms U.S. support for this crucial alliance that is foundational for our national security, Kaine said in a statement after the Pentagon funding bill passed the Senate. It also sends a strong message to, that same thing, authoritarians around the world that the free world remains united. Now, those two articles pretty much cover that situation. Now, the question becomes, why do they want to stop Trump, and who else would want them? And why would Trump? Or what are the dangers of this? That's a question I'll ask. The dangers of this are simple. At this current moment, why this is so relevant at this current moment is that we currently have a war between Russia and Ukraine. Billions of dollars are going into Ukraine from the United States. In addition to that, Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, wants to join NATO. Now, a key part of what's going on here is people don't remember why the war started. The media presents it as if Russia just unilaterally invaded Ukraine for no reason. But we're going to look at an article that gives us a different understanding. Now, it says, this is from the People's World. It says, after months of denial, this is from last year, almost a year and a half ago. Yeah, a year and a half ago. After months of denial, U.S. admits to running Ukrainian biolabs. says Washington has been urged to come clean over its biolab program in Ukraine after the Department of Defense admitted its existence. The Pentagon said on Thursday that it has operated 46 biolabs in Ukraine handling dangerous pathogens after previously dismissing the charges as Russian propaganda. China has joined calls for the United States to explain the role and capacity of the laboratories following the Pentagon's stunning reversal after months of denial. In March, leaked papers appeared to suggest that its operations in Ukraine were sensitive, while Kiev was reportedly blocked from public disclosure about the program. According to a document signed between the two nations, Ukraine is obliged to transfer the dangerous pathogens to the U.S. Department of Defense for biological research. Those who had raised concerns of the presence of biolabs had been dismissed as conspiracy theorists and accused of regurgitating Russian propaganda. But comments made by U.S. Department Secretary of State Victoria Nuland in March prompted further suspicions when she appeared to confirm the biological program, saying she feared the labs would fall in the hands of Russia. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijing said on Friday that the U.S. must explain its activities and called on it to stop single-handedly opposing the establishment of a verification mechanism for the Biological Weapons Convention. As I stress time and again, the U.S. conducts more biomilitary activities than any other country. This is China saying that the U.S. does this. Moreover, the U.S. is the only country opposing the establishment of a verification mechanism for via the Biological Weapons Convention. The international community has long had concerns over this. Recently, Russia has revealed the U.S. biomilitary activities in Ukraine and raised clearly that the U.S. had violated the BWC. According to the stipulations of the BWC, the U.S. is under obligation to provide clarification on Russia's allegations so as to restore international community's confidence in U.S. compliance. Washington denies Russia's claims that it has experimented on humans after it was alleged that the testing of pathogens were carried out on psychiatric patients from Kharkiv. The United States has been accused of engaging in biological warfare in the past. Late Cuban leader Fidel Castro claimed that its operatives had introduced swine fever and dengue fever into Cuba, with previous unknown strain of the latter created in a laboratory. The aim was to create the largest number of victims possible. This is the accusation from Fidel Castro. So, we have one more article on this subject, and then we'll get to the commentary. It says here, this is from even earlier. This is from March 11, 2022. WHO said it advised Ukraine to destroy pathogens in health labs to prevent disease spread. Says the World Health Organization advised Ukraine to destroy high-threat pathogens housed in the country's public health laboratories to prevent any potential spills that would spread disease amongst the population, the agency told Reuters. Like many other countries, Ukraine has public health laboratories researching how to mitigate the threats of dangerous diseases affecting both animals and humans. Its labs have received reports from the United States, the European Union, and the World Health Organization. So now, let's go back. According to Vladimir Putin, the reason this war started was because the U.S. had biological weapons in Ukraine. Putin said that if they did not remove the biological weapons from the Ukraine, he would invade the Ukraine. They did not. He followed through on his threat. At that point, the United States begins to fund the Ukraine. Now, there are people who in the United States and people, supporters of the United States, who want a buffer on the doorstep between Russia and Western Europe. And that's why they would not want a president like Trump to come in and, in essence, virtually defund NATO, remove the United States from NATO, take away the funding, which is billions of dollars that goes to the what we call the military-industrial complex, and also ratchets up the threat of war. So those people, and let's be honest, there are people within the United States government that receive kickbacks from the military-industrial complex who make money making war. Those people do not want a president like Trump, or maybe even someone like Robert Kennedy Jr. possibly, or someone of that ilk, to come and, in essence, remove the United States from NATO and remove the United States, take a more isolationist policy and remove the United States from the possibilities of war in Europe, as the United States has done in the past, where they pretty much have tried their best to stay out of those wars. There have been presidents in the past that have done that. And so this move by Congress was, in essence, a preemptive strike to prevent that. Now, the danger of this is this. There have been calls by Mr. Zelensky of Ukraine to be allowed to enter NATO. There has been statements by Mr. Biden saying that the Ukraine will be allowed to enter NATO eventually. Let's just say there's a ceasefire in this war, and during that time, the Ukraine is voted into NATO. If that ceasefire ends and the war flares back up, at that point, the United States will officially, because of the NATO charter, be at war with Russia. So that is the danger of this bill being passed, because it, in essence, it ropes us into any war that takes place between the NATO members and any foreign power, which the most likely is Russia and or China. And so that is the gist of the situation that we have. There are people that don't want the president to be able to withdraw without an act of Congress. There are people who are receiving kickbacks from the military-industrial complex. And then there are those people behind the scenes who make money from war, and also war helps to destabilize the United States and weaken the United States economy, which is currently very fragile, and the deficit is going through the roof with the help of funding these wars in various places. So, sister, I finally got around to your question. I hope I have answered it thoroughly. For everyone else listening, I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for subscribing. And if you have a question that you would like to present for me and you would like a YouTube video made, you can either DM me on Instagram at dc.radical1, or you can email me at dc.radical_1@protonmail.com. And if you do that, I will eventually make a video answering your question if I have the capacity and the knowledge to do so. Also, I'm gonna be completely honest. If you cash at me with your question, $ DC Radical 1, without question, I will answer your question even quicker. So Again, I thank Miss Ebony from Instagram for asking this question, because it was a very profound question and a very timely question, considering the things that are going on in the world. So with that, brothers and sisters, thank you all for listening. I thank you all for watching. I thank you all for subscribing. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is your brother, DC Radical 1. With that, I say a BB for ODA and straight black pride. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow us on our other social media platforms. On Instagram, we're at dc.radical1. On Twitter, we're at dc_radical_ONE. And the Cash App is $DC Radical 1. Again, thank you for subscribing. A BB for ODA and straight black pride.